Hello, hello, and welcome to Regiments of Renown, Bretonnia. So, as per usual, we'll be taking a look at the Regiments of Renown on the Bretonnian roster, seeing what advantages they provide over the basic unit, and talking about when I might use those in a competitive match. Again, as per usual, this will be primarily pertaining towards domination game mode, but this could help you out in land battles or campaign as well. So let's get right into it. First off, we have the Holy Wardens of Mesantale. Again, I will probably butcher the names. I apologize in advance. So, what these guys get are the basic ones, aside from rank 9 stats, which all units get, all regiments around get, they all get rank 9 stats. They get flaming attacks, magic attacks, and a hefty amount of additional weapon strength, though they do pay the price of losing their shield to do so. These guys are a really nice meat grinder unit. They chew through lightly armored chaff very, very quickly, as well along with the magical attacks are very, very nice to overcome physical resist against a lot of demon type units. And that's what I would kind of consider bringing them, is against those demon factions with a lot of physical resist, or things like Counts or Nurgle with a lot of healing. Either one would allow these guys to really shine, make use of those magical attacks to get through the physical resist of things like Plague Bearers, Demonettes, Bloodletters, those kind of things. Or use the flaming attacks to help you just chew through zombies faster and make sure they're not getting healed. They can do a lot of work against lightly armored chaff very, very quickly with their massive weapon strength and melee attack, but they are very, very squishy themselves, not having super high HP pool and still being lightly armored. So you need to be a little careful with them. They can get ruined pretty quickly by things like arrows or just a missile fire, as well as getting charged by cavalry. So overall, they're very, very good in infantry duels, but a little vulnerable outside of them. Next, we have the Beastslayers of Bastonne, Footsquire ROR. They are a halberd unit, unlike their basic variant. There is no halberd variant of Footsquires. There are no variants normally. So this is the only halberd unit you can really get for armored halberd unit you can get for Bretonnia. So back in Warhammer 2, these guys were basically a meme. Footsquires in general were pretty trash, so you never really even consider these guys. These days, though, in Domination, they have something very, very important to Bretonnia that not a lot of other infantry units have, and that's high leadership. Most of your peasants have really, really low leadership. They can't really hold space. They're expendable, so they can't even capture points very effectively. These guys have full capture weight and high leadership, so Footsquires are a lot better these days. So basically, on top of that, they're, instead of having anti-infantry, they're anti-large. So if you're playing against a faction with a lot of large units, like perhaps a mirror, or a faction like, I don't know, Beastmen, they could be quite a good unit to just sit them on an objective and let them hold down the fort against any cavalry or chariots or monsters that come by. So definitely a solid choice in the right situations, but you need to be sure that your opponents are going to bring large units to actually justify the bringing of them. Next, we have the Wardens of Montfort, Mounted Yeoman Archer ROR. Their big shtick is that they have poison, as well as a bit of extra missile damage. Poison can be really nice for skirmishing. It slows your target, which means that you're almost impossible to catch. So against something like Slaanesh, you're trying to have a skirmish game versus their light cav, which could be pretty effective because their cav is very, very squishy. Mixing these guys in with your basic archers will mean that the enemy cav can't actually catch your skirmishing corps, which is very, very powerful. Because obviously if they can catch your skirmishing corps, you're in a really rough spot, and you don't really want to take that fight with Slaanesh cav head to head. So mixing these guys in against factions with faster cav than these guys are, that can actually catch them, can actually help keep your skirmishing corps alive. That said, these guys aren't that good in general. These days, mounted yeoman archers aren't very strong, so you don't do that a whole lot. But if that's your cup of tea, these guys are really good for that. Next, we have the Defenders of Fleur de Lis. These guys, honestly, they have Frenzy and ITP, but mostly they just have much better stats than the basic Knights Errant. For only 200 extra gold, they get 20 melee attack, and that's some charge bonus and some other stats, but they're going to be hitting a lot harder. As well as ITP is always very nice for an armored cav unit like this, just make sure any monsters that try and punish them don't actually just rout them off immediately. But really, they just hit a lot harder for a good price. So, if you're bringing cheaper cav, these guys are definitely a solid conclusion, just for their raw damage output alone. I feel like they're just a straight upgrade. Next, we have Knights of the Lionhearted. The ROR Knights of the Realm, they provide encourage, as well as causing fear, and getting magical attacks. So, encourage is nice, because your cav tends to roll as a pack. You want to keep things together, keep things blobbed up around, usually around Fae, or characters like that to spread them buffs, as well as heal them up with Earth Bloods consistently. So they're usually close enough to get use out of that, along with the fact that a lot of Bretonnian units don't have very high leadership outside of the Knights, so even if they're fighting alongside infantry, that encourage can be very, very useful. That said, magical attacks is also very useful this day. Physical resist is very, very common these days, again, among the demons, among some of the undead. Even Skaven have a lot of physical resist, so they can do quite well into a lot of matchups. And if they're trying to fight monsters, monsters also tend to have a lot of physical resist, or large characters, dragons, Malekith, Be'lakor, that kind of thing. They could do quite well in that role. That said, they do not have ITP, though they do cause fear, which means they're immune to it themselves, but they can still terror out. So overall, I'd say they're a little niche. Only really take them if you need magical attacks on the cav. Encourage is nice, but it's not something you really want to pay that much for, especially on a unit that is going to be flying around the map, just running around doing whatever, not going to be staying in a stack location, providing it the entire time. You're not going to position them around the Encourage, so you don't really necessarily need it. So you're really paying for the magical attacks. So if you're in a matchup where your opponent has a lot of physical resist, again, demons, maybe Skaven to run down skirmishers, or some of the undead, go for it. Otherwise, maybe just stick to the regular ones. Now, last but not least, we have the Companions of Quenelles. I think that's how it's pronounced. ROR Questing Knights. They have, along with, again, rank 9 stats, a bonus versus large, fire resistance, and Blessing of the Lady, which is 20% physical resistance for as long as their leadership is above broken. Once they rout, it is gone. Even if they rally, they will have lost that ability. They will lose that physical resist. So these guys actually, on paper, look like quite the hefty upgrade. They have really good stats. Bonus versus large is really nice on an AP cav. They're your only anti-large AP cavalry unit. So they're really good at beating down big monsters or enemy armored cav. Along with that physical resist, also really helping you to trade into most enemy cav. The problem with these guys is they're one of the most expensive RORs in the game. The basic questing net costs 1,100 gold. These guys cost 1,600. You're paying an extra 500 for 20% physical resist, 10 bonus versus large, and 20% fire resist. Rank 9 stats included. That's a lot of money for those stats. Like, if they were a little cheaper, like if they were like the usual about like 200 to 300 more than the regular variant, I'd say they'd be a really, really strong unit. But for that price, you better have a really ideal target in mind for them. Otherwise, you're just paying a ton of money for those stats for relatively minor buffs. Like if you have a big monster you need to kill, maybe, you know, again, Malekith on a dragon perhaps, or Be'lakor, like those kind of big monsters that are really prevalent these days. Sure, but outside of those guys, I'm not really sure you need them. And honestly, you have other really strong options to deal with those things. So I'm really not sure you ever really want to pay this much for these guys, unfortunately. Anyway, that is all the RORs for Bretonnia. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you found it helpful, if you liked it, if you had something you want to say, please drop a like, leave a comment. As always, if you want to see more of this content, I'll be having a lot more coming out shortly, so please subscribe. Any support to this channel is very much appreciated. That's all we got for the day. See you next time.